It's Christmas! It's Christmas! Ah!
Never mind that shit.
Would you believe that Naughty Dog have been around since 1984? I sure as hell didn't. Flying under the radar for the late 80s and early 90s, the studio once known as Jam Software got its start developing games for various PCs and never really having a major hit. I mean, Naughty Dog sure as hell weren't known for Way of the fucking Warrior.
End it.
This happened. And we let it happen.
But on the note of Way of the Warrior, Mark Cerny of Universal Interactive was somehow impressed by it. So much so that they struck a 3-game publishing deal with Naughty Dog, following which the two-man team of Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin began working on their next project. A 3D action platformer codenamed, and I'm not making this up, Sonic's Ass Game.
Oh great. They inspired Sonic Rule 34 before Rule 34 was even a thing. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to take a hammer to my balls to numb the pain of what I just thought about.
And after 14 months of development, on September 9th, 1996, their vision came to life in the form of Crash Bandicoot, and they came dick first out of the gate. You may recall some of the commercials where a guy in a Crash mascot costume taunts Mario and Nintendo as a whole, saying such things as, "Hey Plumber Boy, your worst nightmare has arrived." Man, the days of gaming's youth when you could get away with that shit. You try that today, there'd be lawsuits and a riot of greasy neckbeards. You could tell that Sony and Universal had a lot of faith in Crash Bandicoot, and that faith was not misplaced, as Crash Bandicoot was an instant success and went on to sell 6.8 million copies, making it the 11th best-selling PlayStation game of all time. And fittingly so, because Crash Bandicoot is one of the best games on the PlayStation, and by extension, the entire trilogy is easily one of the best video game trilogies of all time. My opinions on the Crash series are a bit odd. While I've played these games for a very long time and had some affection for the series, I've never been able to hold it in as high regard as I did for the Spyro series. And the reasons for that are as such. For one, I only had the collector's edition for the longest time growing up, which included Crash 3, Team Racing, and Bash, a platformer, a racer, and a party game, so it came across to me as a very inconsistent series. And I didn't find the titular Crash very engaging as a character. When I first played these games, I was too young to interpret visual personality, and so Crash came across to my feeble little mind as a plank of wood. Be that as it may, Crash is still easily my second favorite game series on the PS1. Just because I don't like it as good doesn't mean I don't like it. Believe me when I say, being a moderately close second to Spyro, to me is absolutely not a bad thing, and the PS1 Crash games have only gotten better as time has gone on. As I've gotten older and smarter and had the chance to explore the series more thoroughly, I've come to appreciate the series on a much deeper level. Much like a fine wine or Lita, the Crash Bandicoot trilogy has only gotten better with age. But that does come with a caveat though. Remember the video game trifecta theory, the school of thought that the perfect video game trilogy is structured with the first game making a thing, the second fixing that thing, and the third refining that thing? With this theory, the third game is always the best. This series is a key example of that, but the unfortunate implication of that theory is that the first game is always the worst.
But enough about that. Now, I've been banging on for fuck knows how long about the history of Crash Bandicoot, but the history is just as important as the game itself. But now that that's out of the way, let's get this show on the road. Excuse me. So, you gonna work this time, you little bitch? No. No. No! By sun, by sand, by sea, I pray to the gods of the Bay, send me another cup, hey! thanks!
So here's the sitch. There's this guy named Dr. Neocortex, and he has a plot for world domination centered around accelerated evolution, and he accelerates the evolution of many animals, one of which being our titular protagonist Crash, and another being our kitty's love interest, Tawna. Christ, with jubblies that big you could knock out the Big Show! After evolving them, Cortex fails to put Crash through the Cortex Vortex, which would somehow make Crash the general of Cortex's army. Crash then escapes through a window, and Cortex turns his attention to Tawna as a replacement. So that's the plot. The ultimate goal? Fight through 30-odd levels to defeat Cortex's high-ranking henchmen, and finally Cortex himself to rescue your girlfriend. That's it. That's the entire story. And you know what? It's fantastic! I'm not kidding.
Would a face like this lie to you?
But no, I'm serious. It's plainly obvious that this game isn't focused on the story. In fact, the intro cutscene isn't even displayed in the intro, but rather on the title screen when you wait around for 20 seconds. But what does it do? It sets up key plot points, establishes villains, allies, and our protagonist, subtly hints at future events, and establishes a comedic tone and motivation. Save the girlfriend. While it may not seem impressive, it's a 30-second cutscene with absolutely no dead weight. Every single second counts, and the entire story is established in these 30 seconds. Unlike games these days, which will waste your whole day with needless half-baked exposition, Crash Bandicoot tells you exactly what you need to know in the space of 30 seconds and sends you on your way. And the magical thing about it is that this game would be perfectly fine without it. Whether or not you know what's going on, the game is still equally enjoyable. It doesn't concern itself with the story, but what story is there is surprisingly well presented. A small caveat though is that the voice acting is atrocious in a panini.
This Bandicoot will be my general, and he will lead my Cortex commandos to world domination. This time I shall reign triumphant!
I've gotten so used to Clancy Brown's savvy deviousness that hearing Cortex without that voice is akin to a longtime Zelda fan seeing Wand of Gamelon for the first time. Just without the urge to gouge your eyes out with a rusty spoon.
The best stabbing utensil. Where'd you go?
And what little voice acting is there beyond that is also pretty bad. Really, it's fortunate that there's less than 30 seconds of voice acting in Crash Bandicoot. I doubt that voice acting of this quality would be that well received. As I said though, if you look at Crash Bandicoot as just a game and ignore the story completely, it's just as good either way. But the story that's there is surprisingly good. But what is Crash Bandicoot exactly?
Well, first of all, he's a bandicoot, which looks like this. Your childhood will never be the same. Seriously, look at this shit! It's like a kangaroo did the fusion dance with an armadillo!
In all seriousness, Crash Bandicoot is one of the first 3D platformers on the PlayStation, and as such has the hardware limitation of a fixed camera perspective. X jumps, square and circle attacks, some sort of spin, and triangle shows your status. You platform through levels, smashing boxes, get your mind out of the gutter, and defeating enemies, and with every enemy and every box you collect Wumpa Fruit, which collecting 100 of will grant you an extra life. And sometimes you also collect Aku Aku masks, or as they're called in this game, Witch Doctor masks, which will grant you an extra hit. Otherwise you die in one hit, and they stack but only once, because at 3 you go the Crash Bandicoot equivalent of Super Saiyan. So the game as a whole is about as simple as you can get, but it's only theoretically simple, in that while there are only 2 controls, jump and attack, it's a base for countless variety to be built upon. You see, almost every level introduces new mechanics. The game starts out very basic, wash up on a random shore and start bouncing on boxes and attacking enemies and occasionally jumping over a pit. Simple stuff. But before long you find yourself sliding down slick surfaces, timing jumps on flaming platforms while dodging piranha plants, or climbing rotating platforms at varying speeds onto a staircase that collapses every 5 seconds, and the list goes on.
So, I was gonna do a visual gag, but my cat Gambit decided to hop up on my lap. Aw, he just wants to be a star. It's okay, I'll wait until he hops down.
It creatively introduces new obstacles that each have a unique way to be dealt with, but never sacrifices its simplicity. You see rolling rollers, what do? You pick your moment to jump. Oh, there's more than one? You need precise timing. Is it the only point of safety between 2 pits? Gotta be quick.
Simply amazing!
Once again, it may seem simple, but every obstacle in this game has a slightly unique resolution, meaning that every level is played in subtly different ways. You never have 2 levels that ever feel the same, meaning it never ceases to be interesting. What I'm getting at is that the variety in the gameplay is environmental. While the base gameplay stays the same, the environments the game puts you in change and are handled in different ways. The game's variety is environmental rather than directly in the base gameplay. And what we've mentioned here is merely the tip of the iceberg. There are outliers in the gameplay, 2 to be exact. You have older levels, which are the most anxiety-inducing experiences ever, all you do is run, run, run. And look at that face. That is either the face of sheer frightened determination or terrible constipation. Plainly speaking, every time I made it to the end of one of these levels, I had the most massive smile on my face. They are the type of levels that one fuck-up will kill you invariably, and so maneuvering around obstacles and trial and erroring your way to completion, especially when the margin for error is so thin, is massively cathartic. The other unique levels are hog rides, which seem to be a prototype for reoccurring levels in later games, and was a forced runner where you have to maneuver around obstacles. As dumb as this may sound, but I'm anything if not dumb, it's kind of the same sensation as bombing a hill on a skateboard. Or if you don't understand the lingo, just riding down a hill on a skateboard. A complete adrenaline rush where any number of things could go wrong, though bailing in Hog Wild is more frustrating in the let me try again, I got this shit kind of way, rather than the I can taste my femur kind of way. Those are the two unique types of levels, but even the levels with the basic platforming setup are unique, like dark levels where the Aku Aku masks are your only source of light, the levels that are one long broken bridge which keeps you on your toes with hazards every 3 steps like navigating around shit in a dog park, or ancient tombs with countless unreliable platforms that spin and collapse, raise and lower, and just move all over the place. And even the levels with variety, you have a heap of shit thrown at you, facing a bunch of hazards simultaneously, like having to time jumps on collapsing platforms while invincible hologram droids are in your way requiring pixel perfect accuracy and timing, or the levels that are 95% deadly with mostly instant death water, and the places where you can step are either slippery, deadly, or collapsing, motivating you to just keep moving, or walls that pop out and try and push you off the edge, all the while the floor is popping in and out, all the while bats are flying in your face, dividing your attention over multiple places. Every level is unique in its own right, and the vast majority of them are incredibly well made, riding the line between too hard and too easy, finding complexity within simplicity, a satisfying and cathartic experience that ramps up in difficulty competently. It has buttery smooth controls, tons of variety, and is, well, genuinely fun.
Dude, Cortex is tripping balls.
Hey Crash, wanna buy some milk?
I must say though, I was probably overselling the difficulty earlier when I was talking about the various obstacles you have to face. I think I made it sound harder than it actually is. But let me make this clear. Crash Bandicoot is tough but fair. The way they constantly introduce new mechanics mixed with the overall difficulty may seem like they're throwing you to the wolves, but that's not the case. Every level has multiple gimmicks to work with, but they each get worked in one by one. The one that immediately springs to mind would be the level The Lab, the level where Crash has to start a meth lab to pay for Coco's college education. Unless that's just that dream I had. The hazards you encounter in the lab are as such: timed doors, timed trapdoors, electric currents, yellow blobs, and electric lab assistants who just want a hug.
You lying bastard!
Each of these hazards are introduced one by one, each in a safe environment where you can easily figure out what to do to bypass each obstacle without much hassle. But then suddenly these obstacles start to overlap and you start to combine what you've learned until the final sequence, which often features most if not everything you've encountered in one giant gauntlet. But you've already experienced and gotten past all of these obstacles individually, and so the game teaches you how to get past the hard parts by subtly teaching you about them in safe environments throughout the level. Quite frankly, the level design in Crash Bandicoot is genius, with a few exceptions, and we'll get to those. There's no tutorial level, but it doesn't need one, as the solution to every obstacle is given to you organically with the level design. You go from, there's a pit, I need to jump it, there's an enemy, I need to attack it, now there's a pit and an enemy, I need to jump and attack, to, this gap is too wide for me to jump, but these turtles were used in earlier levels to get me to a hard to reach item, 1 + 2 = 3. The organic tutorials that this game goes for means that the gameplay just feels natural. Everything is taught organically, and so the game never feels unfair or forced. You always have an idea of what's going on, and the game never introduces a mechanic that doesn't fit into the simple control scheme. That, combined with the buttery smooth controls itself, means that your fuck-ups are your own fault. There's never a point where you're faced with a challenge that you don't know how to overcome, but the game still has a meaty and competent difficulty that ramps up at a constant pace. And while it does get challenging, and boy howdy does it get challenging, it's almost never unfair or rage-inducing. It's the type of challenging that keeps you coming back for one more shot. Honestly, the gameplay as a whole is great. The controls are slick, the difficulty is competent, the level design is genius, the platforming is satisfying, it finds that sweet spot of complex enough to offer endless variety but simple enough to have a pick up and play quality, and has the wonderful quality of just being incredibly cathartic. Getting past a series of obstacles, completing various challenges, and getting to the end of levels builds up all this tension in you. I can't tell you how many times I clenched my teeth before a hard jump or sucked air through my teeth every time I failed, and the satisfaction and catharsis of reaching the end of a level is euphoric, and it just gives you a raging adrenaline stiffy.
Well, I should probably shut the hell up.
As I alluded to earlier though, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are a few specific levels that can smed, but in particular I want to talk about the bonus rounds. Now, the later games also did bonus rounds, but they were different in a number of ways. One, they had this cool as fuck transition, whereas here it looks like Crash is being sucked off while being beamed up by Scotty, but Scotty isn't particularly motivated.
But now something actually relevant.
In later games, you had the opportunity to retry these levels indefinitely, whereas here you have one chance, and if you fail, that's it. You can't do that bonus round again unless you redo the level as a whole, which wouldn't be an issue if, and this is the biggest problem in the game, and it's a massive fucking problem, these bonus rounds are the only place where you can save. Yeah! So you're telling me that I have to complete a mini level just to save? And that's made even bigger of a problem in that these levels get harder and harder as the game goes on. If you get a game over, you have to start from the last save point wherever that may be. And if you get to a later level, you can't go back to save at an easier save point in an earlier level, so there's no easy way to save. So if you happen to get to a save point where the bonus level is too hard, you're fucked. And maybe it's a hardware limitation, but is there any reason I couldn't just save after every level? Or here's an idea, even if you fail the bonus round, you get to save anyway, because the fact that I even got the 3 items to get to the bonus round should be justification enough to warrant a save point. Why is the privilege of a save point so hard to obtain? If you fail to get a save point, then get a game over, that could set you back 10, 20, 30 minutes or more. I need to stress that you need to get 3 items to get to the bonus round, then need to get to the end of a series of harder and harder bonus levels just to save. And if you fail one of these save points and then get a game over, you get sent back to your last save point, which could be ages ago, forcing you to needlessly redo previous levels for no other reason than,
Hey, I'm gonna beat myself with this baseball bat. Stop me when the save system makes sense, okay? Okay. I'm gonna go get coffee.
this is the sole reason why Crash Bandicoot has not aged as well as its sequels, the sole reason why it's the worst in the trilogy. I find Crash Bandicoot to be mostly the perfect difficulty, but if I fail one of the harder levels, I have to redo earlier levels, and that's not fun. That's just busy work. Fortunately, if you need to, the first few levels are just littered with extra lives, so if you get a game over, you want to redo these first few levels to get about 20 extra lives. But do you see an issue in having to redo these earlier levels just to be able to do later levels? It's just busy work. However, I will say that the core gameplay is fun enough that it wasn't a big deal to redo these earlier levels, and if you do get good at this game, you'll find it surprisingly short. A straight run through to the final boss may get you 3 to 4 hours, but that's missing the point slightly. To get the true ending, you need to get every gem in the game, then in the level The Great Hall, you hop from gem to gem until you get to Tawna. Then you don't even fight the final boss, you just fly away, get a where are they now before getting the credits. However, to get to the final boss, you just jump over one pit and there's the exit.
Motherfucker, why'd you wipe your brow? You did literally nothing.
To get these gems, you must go to every level and smash every box in the level, then a gem is bestowed upon you when the level is completed.
Why does that face look familiar?
It adds quite a lot of replay value to come back and see if you can smash every box in the level, and those gems are very tricky to get but are very satisfying when you do get them. And some gems can only be gotten by collecting other gems, it's a little confusing, and some of these gems can only be activated from secondary bonus levels from Cortex and Brio.
Nope.
And I guess there are a few specific levels that I'm not very fond of, but they're outweighed significantly by the good levels, like Temple Ruins, Castle Machinery, Generator Room, and many more. There are only a few levels I can think of that are kind of meh, like the Lost City, Toxic Waste, or the Road to Nowhere.
Road to Nowhere? That's horseshit. Come on. No road leads nowhere, otherwise it's not a road. Come on. Where does this road really lead? The road to nowhere leads to me. Laugh, sheep.
But the absolute nadir of this game is Sunset Vista. When I used to own a Sony Xperia Play, it came bundled with Crash Bandicoot, and I used to play it in math class when I was bored. But Sunset Vista is where I threw in the towel because it was way too hard. It's not so much a difficulty spike as it is a difficulty mountain. For one, there are way too many areas with a super tiny window of time to act in, like this set of 3 jumps where bats come, then as soon as the bats are gone, there's a fire platform that activates, then as soon as that deactivates, the bats are back. There's this incredibly hard climb I swear goes on for 10 minutes, and one one false move will kill you. Then there's another stretch of similar obstacles coupled with a gauntlet of platforms popping in and out, and once again, one false move and you're dead. And take a guess how long this level is. A straight run through would probably take 15 to 20 minutes, making it the longest level in the game, and quite frankly, this is the only level I struggled on, making it the hardest level, at least for me. And it's on the second of 3 islands. Really? Hey, let's make the longest level and the hardest level the same level and put it halfway through the game. Yeah! Hey, anybody remember this bottle? Throwback City, bitch. It's just bullshit. Most levels are great, but Sunset Vista is just way too hard for what it is, and it just goes on forever. The only reason I managed to beat it was because I happen to have almost 30 lives left over from earlier levels, and if you don't have that, well, sucks to be you. On the plus side, this game does get back on track after that, but Sunset Vista is by far the worst level in the game. Also, what kind of name is Sunset Vista? That doesn't sound like a massive city in the middle of nowhere, that sounds like a retirement home. Are you old, withered, wrinkled? Then maybe it's time you look into a retirement home. Hi, I'm TGX, introducing you to Sunset Vista Retirement Homes. Here at Sunset Vista, we offer the following features: around-the-clock care, top-of-the-line customized food, endless hours of entertainment, unique barbecues, deadly bats, racist depictions of Native Americans to remind you of your childhood. If you need more convincing, just listen to the testimony of our alumni. Oh, that Adrian. So, if you're thinking retirement home, think Sunset Vista. Sunset Vista, we hope you enjoy your stay. Cause you ain't getting out in association with Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows, retirement experts. But if this game ever gets too hard, you can just look up a password to get back to where you were. And on the note of Sunset Vista, it's odd that this is where the game literally shows its true colors. What I mean is, it's a very pretty level, probably the prettiest in the game, and for the PS1, Crash Bandicoot as a whole is a very pretty game. I say once again that obviously most games from the 32-bit era don't look as good as they once did, and Crash Bandicoot is no exception. But pound for pound, this game still looks quite good. It's lush, colorful, and has nice expressive detailed artwork, and if you can't look past the graphical aging, well, I guess that's on you. And the game's lush forests have a fitting soundtrack. It seems very natural and tribal, as I feel it should, but cleverly the soundtrack changes over time. It starts out very naturey in the early jungle levels, but as you move more and more into the technological center of Cortex's castle, it gradually transitions into mechanical ambience. It's very clever. Then that leaves us with the bosses, and as ever with games for the PS1, the bosses are fairly hit or miss. It seems like that's a running theme in games I've been covering as of late. Well, anyway, the first boss in the game is the casually racist Papu Papu, a native tribe leader who apparently ate all the cakes. It's a fairly lame boss fight. All you need to do is jump on his head. Crack is whack, yo! Pull up your fucking pants. Then Ripper-Roo, a failed experiment that went nuts when they attempted to use the Evolvo Ray. This boss is marginally better, only in that there's a lot of deadly space in the arena, and to beat it, you need to time jumping on TNT when Roo's near it. Also, I'd just like to point out that that is an offensive stereotype, okay? Just because I have severed limbs hanging from my ceiling does not translate to uncontrollable laughter. I should get help. And then you have Koala Kong, a super strong, super massive koala who apparently goes to the same gym as Mugshot. 'Cause he skipped leg day! Other than that, you have to dodge rocks he throws and dodge TNT, and when the time is right, hit a rock back at him and make sure you don't hit the minecart. This is the first good boss fight in the game, as it actually requires the tackling of several obstacles and multitasking, but it's really weird. Like, why does Kong's portrait look like he has the mumps? Or why does he shake his
Well then.
Then you have Pinstripe, a stereotypical Italian gangster, turning this game into the average cover shooter. It's not bad though. It's all about timing and picking your moments to strike. Then probably the zenith of the boss fights in Crash Bandicoot, Dr. Nitrous Brio. Half the boss fight is spent dodging and jumping on green blobs, then halfway through the boss fight, Brio hulks up. It's very inventive and nice and challenging, and the sudden transformation of Brio into the incredible Brio is absurd. And lastly, the biggest miss in the game, Dr. Neo Cortex. How do I know it's a miss? Because I dropped my controller and immediately took a hit and still beat him first try. All you do is dodge pink and blue lasers and fire his green lasers back at him. It's piss easy and a big missed opportunity. It's the final boss and was probably the easiest boss in the game. It kinda ends this game on a whimper instead of a bang, which is unfortunate. Almost as unfortunate as Cortex's hairline. For what it's worth though, Cortex comes into his own in later games, both as a boss and a character. He doesn't have that much of a personality in this game, which is understandable given the limited screen time. He's essentially Danny DeVito by way of Doc Brown. He was just a mad scientist and a device to drive the plot. He was as good as he needed to be. But who does have a lot of personality, surprisingly, is Crash himself. He says so little, but displays so much visual personality. The way he bares his teeth when he runs, the expressions he makes when he's left in idle animation, and all the little touches in the way he walks, jumps, or even dies. He comes across as dim as a bag of thumbtacks and a bit of a wuss, but valiantly fights on as his loyalties outweigh his fears and he enjoys what he does. He's not complex or tragic. Among other things, he's just a dim Bandicoot who likes to have fun. And that's kind of the word for the entire game. It's not complex, it's not emotional, it's not meant to pose a philosophical quandary or a tragic premise, it's just meant to be a fun game. It has one purpose, and that is to let the player have fun.
But let's put on our thinking caps for a second. What is it that makes the experience of playing Crash Bandicoot? Oh my god.
It's the spirit of classic 2D platformers in 3D. Let me explain. Back in the 32 and 64-bit era, everything was moving towards a primarily 3D gaming market. Even the most dyed-in-the-wool 2D franchises were upgrading to that illustrious third dimension. And what this meant was an inevitable shift to more complex gameplay. Gone were the days where you had an attack button, a jump button, and one goal. Get to the end of the level. Suddenly, there was no simplicity in gaming anymore. Even things like Mario had objective screens, a dozen button commands, and various changes in gameplay style over the course of the game. While Mario 64 is a classic game, it felt specifically built for 3D, and as such didn't really resemble the previous games. But Crash Bandicoot stuck to its guns. In a world moving towards complex cinematic gameplay, it took platforming back to its roots. It felt like a classic 2D platformer put through the filter of 3D. What does it do? It gives you three things: a jump button, an attack button, and a goal. Get to the end, and from that base builds its gameplay. It's the natural evolution of 2D platformers, whereas many of the 3D platformers of the time were built from the ground up. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is Crash Bandicoot has the same beautiful simplicity of old school 2D platformers. It feels retro for all the right reasons. To be honest, Crash Bandicoot feels more akin to classic Mario games than Mario 64, as controversial as that statement may be, because it has the same beautiful simplicity that games like Mario or Castlevania had, just in 3D. That's what makes the experience of playing Crash Bandicoot the fantastic experience that it is. Of course, it has the slick controls, the great level design, the satisfying cathartic gameplay that finds complexity within simplicity, a mostly perfect difficulty that ramps up competently, pretty graphics, and a great soundtrack. But the sticking point, the glue that holds everything together, is the beautiful simplicity and retro-style platforming of Crash Bandicoot. That's what brings Crash Bandicoot from great to classic.
I don't doubt why Crash Bandicoot is considered one of the best PS1 games. Even in spite of its flaws, and there are a few noteworthy flaws, it's still one of the most genuinely enjoyable games on the PlayStation. That being said though, those noteworthy flaws were ironed out in later games, so even though this is a great game, it still is, and simply because something had to be, the worst in the trilogy. But that's not saying it's a bad game, quite the opposite really. Being the worst of a fantastic trilogy is absolutely not a bad thing, and Crash Bandicoot is still a fantastic game. So take it from somebody who's not super familiar with the Crash Bandicoot series, pick this game up and you'll have a good time. It's a little flawed, but a fantastic game nonetheless.
When that didn't do well enough to warrant a full trilogy, and after the merger between Activision and Vivendi, and the 2010 release of the iOS game Nitro Kart 2, the series lay dormant for a whole 6 years. Until at E3 2016, the heavens opened up and the angels sang, "Our prayers had been answered, Crash Bandicoot was back!" In Skylanders.
You know, I always thought I'd die by asphyxiation, but not from a controller cord.
Once again, I would have preferred it be a new game instead of us wallowing in the past, but it still looks very promising. Now, what do I want for the Crash Bandicoot series? To be honest, I don't know. What I want for the series is just what is best. I don't know what that is, but whatever is best for the series, that's what I want, whatever that may be. Crash had a long way to fall and now has nowhere to go but up, and I'm confident that we've only seen the beginning of his redemption. And after E3 2016, he's back in the public eye, and we can only wait and see how they capitalize on this momentum. My only request: Activision, don't fuck this up. Otherwise, I'm coming for you. And I will show no mercy.
You know what? I'm gonna go see if it's snowing.
Oh right, the murders.